Okay, here we are. So folks should now see the welcome screen. Welcome to our webinar, Solar Plus Paths to Accelerate Deployment with Solar Deployment with Community Choice Energy. My name is Woody Hastings. Thank you all for joining us. And I'll be your master of ceremonies for the next hour. We'd like to first thank our sponsors. Solarcraft is our sponsor for this month's webinar. Solarcraft is proud to have earned the trust of more than 6,000 clients in Marin, Sonoma, and Napa counties by providing high-quality solar and clean energy systems for homes in the North Bay and businesses throughout Northern California. Solarcraft supports its mission of creating a more financially, environmentally, and socially sustainable community, a community that can lead and inspire the world. We're also grateful to the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation for generous support on our Clean Power Exchange work. Your webinar team today is myself, Woody Hastings, Renewable Energy Manager. Unfortunately, Ross Markey is not able to be with us today. Ross usually helps with the question and answer period. Unfortunately, Ross's grandmother passed away yesterday, so he's with family today. So our hearts go out to Ross, and we're with him in spirit, and hopes for him and his family. Our presenters today are Chris Cohn, a longtime renewable energy expert and the lead author of the white paper that we will be presenting today on solar and the state of solar in Sonoma County, and Brad Heavner, Policy Director for the California Solar Energy Industries Association. Little housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded and all attendees will receive a copy of the recording. Please do enter your questions in your control panel on, I think, the right of your screen. You should be able to enter questions. Enter those questions at any time, but we will reserve the last 15 or 20 minutes of the webinar for the question and answer period. If you're having any trouble seeing or hearing, we'll try to resolve it on the spot. But either way, you will receive a recording of the webinar. There are 3 handouts that also should be visible in your control panel. The report itself, the PowerPoint slides from today, and the speaker bios. A little bit about our work for folks that are not familiar with Center for Climate Protection and the Clean Power Exchange. The Clean Power Exchange is a program and a website that was launched last year. The website cleanpowerexchange.org features an interactive map of all 58 counties and all 482 cities in the state of California and the status of community choice development. We issue an e-news that goes out every 2 weeks on news and information about community choice and renewable energy around the state. And bolded there is that we've just recently launched a solar and community choice page on the Clean Power Exchange website, so be sure to check that out. That's in the resources section. We also host an annual Business of Local Energy Symposium. The last one was in Long Beach in May, and the next one's coming up in mid-2018 in Sacramento. So keep your eyes open for that. And then we host these webinars on a monthly basis. We just started them in June. This is our 4th webinar, and happy to have you here. And lastly, we do periodic white papers on issues and topics that are relevant to community choice and clean energy. And so that is what our today's webinar focuses on. Our next webinar is going to be on November 29th, and it is going to focus on the situation in San Diego with the marketing situation against the emerging community choice program in San Diego. So that's the registration is already open. You can screen grab that or get it from the PowerPoints, which are posted on the in the handouts. And we do also note that in several of the webinars, folks, if we haven't had enough time to answer all the questions and go through all of the discussion, so we have created a forum where we can continue the conversation after the webinar. And so that's the hyperlink for that. And again, you can screen grab that or pick it up from the PowerPoint that's there in the handouts. And without further ado, I'd like to now hand off screen control to Chris Cohn, who will present her paper on, accelerating solar deployment with community choice energy. So Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you, Woody, and it's a pleasure to be here today to share the research that we've compiled. So the name of the report is The State of Solar Energy in Sonoma County, Paths to Accelerate Adoption. The report was prepared for the Center for Climate Protection under a commission from Sonoma Clean Power, the community choice agency that serves Marin and Sonoma counties. The goals of the report are to evaluate the state of the solar industry in Sonoma County, to identify local, state, and national policy drivers, describe policy, industry, and technology trends, and finally, explore solar's role in the current transition to a local distributed energy system. Oops, Woody, I don't seem to have control.
Let's see. Trying again. Oh, let's try now. Got it?
Well, I'm seeing your there. Nope.
All right. Well, I'll move your slides then.
Thank you. Yeah. Next slide, please. Great. So for the report, we compiled metrics that are specific to Sonoma County, and these are derived from state databases, including the California Net Energy Metering and California Solar Initiative databases. So all these metrics are specific to Sonoma County solar industry. On a kilowatts installed per capita basis, Sonoma County ranks second among the 9 Bay Area counties and 22nd among California's 58 counties. Since 1999, Sonoma County has installed 95.4 megawatts of solar generation, 38 megawatts of which were installed by local solar contractors. In the Sonoma County market, the local vendors provide 40% of the installed capacity and job creation. And local solar has been very good news for the cumulative avoided greenhouse gas emissions, which currently stand at 2,763 metric tons of GHG that has been avoided since 1999 because of local solar systems. Next slide, please. So the solar industry growth has been supported by federal, state, and local policies as shown in the chart on the slide. There are 5 key developments in that regard. The investment tax credit, a federal tax credit program for residential and commercial solar, has been available and is since 1978 and is ongoing. Net energy metering provides incentives for grid-connected solar systems, has been in operation since 1996, and more than 90% of all California customer-side solar systems are in the NEM program. Community choice aggregation, which was enabled by state legislation in 2002, allows local government agencies to have decision-making authority over the sources of energy for electricity. And our local CCA, of course, is Sonoma Clean Power, which launched in 2014. The California Solar Initiative began in 2007 and just recently timed out in 2016. It was an incentive program based on the metered performance of grid-connected solar systems. And the number of local projects that received CSI incentives is shown in the chart in the kind of beige or orange area there, and you can see that the incentive had a profound impact on the growth of the local market. And finally, property assessed clean energy financing which was made possible in 2009, has been another important factor to the growth of the local solar market. The Sonoma County Energy Independence Program launched that same year, and since then we now have private PACE providers, many of whom are also offering financing in Sonoma County currently. Next slide. So there are 4 key concepts that run throughout the report. The first is distributed energy resources, which is a combination of renewable energy generation, energy efficiency, energy storage, electric vehicles, and smart controllers that in combination allow a building to have control over its own energy use and energy generation, and basically gives it the ability to respond to grid conditions such as periods of the day in the evening and morning when there's a high demand for electricity. Now, Solar Plus basically builds on or optimizes the DER configuration because it is the distributed renewable generation platform to which distributed energy resources can be incorporated, and this gives the customer that same ability to manage and introduce a reliability into their energy use and the cost of energy at their site. Next slide, please. So the Community Choice Agency, which I mentioned earlier, gives communities control over the purchase of clean energy resources, as well as opportunities to accelerate the adoption of these resources. CCAs growing quite readily in the state of California, and they are a focal point for local government and community stakeholders to participate in this shift to a distributed energy system. And finally, the state policy is very focused on what is called integrated distributed energy resources. And this is the strategy that these new technological advances give customers the power to manage their energy use and cost. Next slide, please. So this is the big transition we're in right now, where we're moving from a centralized electricity system to a distributed local power system. And this is being driven primarily by technology, having the technological ability to build these local systems, but it is also supported very strongly in California by policy. And this new distributed system is where the Solar Plus business model has a lot of opportunity. So there are a number of policy trends, and I know that Brad Heavner is going to be diving into this in detail. I just wanted to mention two options here. One is that the state of California has produced a distributed energy resource action plan. This pulls together a number of regulatory processes into one coordinated effort. They're looking at rates and tariffs, distribution planning, wholesale distributed generation, and coordinating many different state agencies and processes to bring this together into an integrated approach. And then there's a big initiative for grid modernization to turn the existing grid into a smart system that can take local energy and local storage and coordinate all those resources to provide a better and more stable energy service. Next slide, please. So we had some findings in the research, and the first of which is that local solar has benefited from the proactive state policies that have been ongoing for the last several decades. but it has also benefited from strong local industry and government leadership. In fact, Solar Sonoma County, which is a nonprofit partnership that's been around since, I'm thinking about 2007, and is currently now a program of the Center for Climate Protection. This is the industry entity that brought a lot of industry knowledge into the planning and strategizing for promoting solar in Sonoma County. And this partnership has set the stage for a thriving solar industry. Other partners in this have been the CCA as well as local government partners, and they play a particularly interesting role right now because with the energy system moving to the local jurisdictions, there are resources that are only available locally, such as land use, transportation, planning authority, zoning ordinances, things of that nature, that can be deployed to support the new distributed energy system. And CCAs in particular have an opportunity to guide and lead that effort as a bridge between the local governments and the utility system as a whole. Next slide, please. So among the other findings that are in the report is this dynamic market for solar industry is really supported in California by a robust regulatory process that is trying to stay ahead of the curve of what's going on technologically and also environmentally in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And also there are efforts at the distribution level, the California Independent System Operator level, where the grid, actual whole grid management occurs in developing wholesale markets for renewable generation and aggregated distributed energy resources. So a lot of planning is going on currently right now, laying down roadmaps and strategies to make this shift possible. And finally, there is a big advantage to having a strong local team. And in Sonoma County, we've, since 2001, the county jurisdictions have set a precedent repeatedly for working together as 9 cities in the county, and then with associated agencies such as Sonoma County Water Agency, as well as the Regional Climate Protection Authority. So this tradition of partnership in Sonoma County is a strong asset in our local deployment of distributed energy resources and solar plus projects. Next slide. So we had about 13 recommendations arising from the research, grouped into 4 categories. The first has to do with the role of the CCA in solar plus deployment. This year, California Public Utilities Commission President Michael Picker has called on CCAs in a number of public forums to play a key role in leading the distributed energy system deployment and asking them to delineate how the local government tools and other resources can be brought to bear in this planning and deployment process. And this gives this new role of the CCA and really a kind of leadership role in the DER deployment for CCAs. It provides them with an opportunity to expand their current business model as a provider of electricity to embrace new opportunities in the distributed energy future, and also to be a lead advocate on behalf of community priorities as solar plus projects are deployed. Next slide. So how do we deploy the solar plus DER local grid as it's coming on board in the next few years? There's a number of specific recommendations, but they are categorized together based on a couple of important points. The first is that the state is going to be launching a grid mapping tool that all the partners, locals and state and utility can use to identify sites for Solar Plus projects at the distribution grid level. And in addition to that, there is a new open source standards-based metering platform that uses smart meter data to provide CCAs and IOUs with the means to identify customers who could benefit from a Solar Plus project or efficiency upgrades, and really be able to, the platform allows a very detailed assessment of individual accounts and the energy, clean energy opportunities associated with them. So these tools mean that CCAs and their local government partners will be able to identify and prioritize as well as plan for the new distributed energy future. And this also includes helping current PV system owners add DER features to their systems so that they can also take advantage of the new developments. Next slide. Next slide.
That is the next slide.
No, it should
Chris,
be.
we're at number 8, number 9, number 10, number 11.
Nope, it should be recommendation 8 is what I'm looking for.
Well, that's what I've got up on my screen.
Oh, okay, there it is. I'm sorry, there must have been a lag. I apologize. Okay, so the next category of recommendations has to do with switching off of natural gas and gasoline. And there is a lot of impetus on the economic and environmental side to basically electrify everything. CCAs and their local partners can lead these kinds of initiatives to move customers off of natural gas and gasoline. All electric building and transportation, daytime charging stations, solar parking canopies that co-locate PV generation with EV charging stations are some of the ways in which CCAs and their local partners can lead a fuel switching initiative. Next slide. Great. So finally, wrapping up on recommendations, financing is always key to the growth of the solar market. We do have a pilot that's being conducted by the state. It's an on-bill repayment program. It currently focuses on rebated energy efficiency measures, but once the framework is worked out, this could be a platform for Solar Plus projects, and CCAs and local governments could definitely play an advocacy role in expanding the on-bill repayment scope. And finally, and very importantly, solar professionals are really leading this, especially in Sonoma County, where we have real experts in our midst who have been working with local governments and working with policy and identifying market barriers and really helping to drive the growth of our local solar market. So the development of Solar Plus business models is very important as we move into this distributed energy system. Next slide. So a couple of takeaways from the report. There's a lot in it, so if you want to dive into the details, feel free. It's really a fascinating subject and there's a lot going on. But high-level takeaways are that the solar industry, which is mature and growing very quickly, provides a very strong platform for the emergence of distributed energy resources. This idea of Solar Plus, combining the PV generation with these other resources such as storage, efficiency, and demand response, is a very strong combination. Second, Solar Plus turns solar into a service that improves grid reliability, so that now properties with solar systems that have DER features can modulate their energy use, their energy production, and respond to conditions on the grid. And there is an economic value to that that's currently being worked out. Solar Plus also expands the benefits, economic, environmental, and community, in that it drives local investment, it solves local GHG problems, and it creates jobs. So there's a win-win-win going on for the community benefits. And finally, community choice agencies are uniquely and well positioned to lead a Solar Plus adoption and ensure and be the representative for community priorities as the distributed energy system is designed and deployed over the next 5 to 10 years. So those are the highlights, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the webinar. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Chris. That was really something. Yes, we will hold. Please feel free to, folks, type your questions into that control panel question area anytime. But we will get to those questions after Brad Heavner offers his presentation. And so, without any further ado, again, we will move along to Brad. And Brad, hopefully you're still on the line. And I'll tell you what, I don't know what's going on with the screen sharing today. I've been doing the same thing I've done every other time, but it's not working today. So I'll move your slides through. Just let me know when you want me to switch the slides.
Okay, that sounds fine. Thanks, Woody, and thanks, Chris. I really appreciate being part of this and supporting the excellent research that the Center for Climate Protection is doing. Chris did a great job pulling together this report. I was happy to give a little bit of input to it, but she really pulled together a great product. And I absolutely appreciate the work of the Center for Climate Protection in supporting CCAs and the march toward clean energy generally. So CalCEA is a trade group that we have 475 company members that are involved in solar plus storage in California. It's a combination of installers, manufacturers, financing companies, consulting firms, a little of everything. Traditionally, obviously, solar, but these days equally solar and storage as the industry and the market are evolving. So I'll go through and just talk a little bit about market trends, where we're at with solar plus storage in California, and then talk about how this may interact with CCAs in the future. So next slide. All right, so you guys know that it has been a pretty good success story, fueled largely by California Solar Initiative and many other state policies that have successfully achieved market transformation in solar in California. There's been a lot of growth over recent years, and we installed 4 million solar panels in California last year on farms, rooftops, parking lots, and other places. It's been good. The growth has been good, and the price has come down, as we've achieved scale. So that the fact that California Solar Initiative doesn't exist anymore has been fine. That policy worked great to gradually wean us off subsidies at the same time as it was growing the industry. But people have had the feeling, looking at this and seeing the growth in the market, that solar is invincible. No matter what you do, it's going to continue to grow because everybody loves solar and it's doing so well. But if you flip to the next slide, you see that this year has been quite a wake-up call. That there's a pretty serious downturn in the market happening right now. So people are not hiring. It's more the opposite, and people are very nervous about the state of the market. Now, we're still on pace to install 1 gigawatt of local solar, so that is a good number. And if we can maintain that level, it's pretty good success in itself. But I think the days of skyrocketing growth are done. And not to say we're okay with zero growth, but it is a bit of a different day now. And this has to do with various factors. One of them is the flattening of the residential rate tiers. Used to be the more you use, the higher the rate you pay, and that was just a price signal for customers to do both energy efficiency and self-generation, and it worked great. But it was seen as too harsh of a price signal for some families, and so it was basically done away with. and then changes to net metering in the NEM 2.0 tariff, and also changes in the time of use time periods have had very severe impacts on the market. So let's look a little bit utility by utility, though. Next slide here. SDG&E was the first utility to go into NEM 2, and the results on the residential side have been pretty stark. The NEM 2 has mandatory time of use rates for residential customers, which they haven't been mandatory in the past, and it's been a challenge to figure out how to explain that to people in ways that they're comfortable with and to maintain the momentum. So I think NEM 2 in itself and the mandatory TOU in San Diego has had a very big impact. And then this is, it's lasted for SDG&E. Go to the next slide. PG&E was the next utility to go into NEM 2, and it seems to have had less of a percentage impact, but still a very clear impact to residential installations. And I look at residential here because there's a quick turnaround. The development timeline for commercial projects is so long that it's hard. We still aren't seeing the impact in terms of actual interconnections from the policies that have recently changed. But with residential, it's a really good bellwether of how the market is doing, and the NEM 2 has had a big impact there. And then SCE in the next slide just recently went to NEM 2. The latest data on interconnections that's available right now is from July. It's always 2 to 3 months old, so it's really too early to tell, but we certainly expect the trend to be about the same for SCE. And then if you look over on the commercial side, it's really bad news. And I think that this is less of an issue of NEM 2 and more of the uncertainty from the time of use rate structure. And in this case, we're looking at applications data rather than interconnections data because, again, it's usually a year between the two when you first apply for interconnection and you actually develop, finance plan, permit the project, and get it built. So looking only at applications, however, the rate is way down, and then for many projects, it's a long time, 6 to 12 months of development before you even submit the application. So the new business starts just anecdotally are as bad or worse than what this chart shows. So we're certainly very concerned about that market. People are spinning their wheels a little bit in commercial solar. So next slide. Again, I think the biggest reason there is the uncertainty in TOU periods. We are shifting to evening peak for time of use rates. Commercial and agricultural customers have been on mandatory time of use for some time, so they're used to the concept of TOU. And traditionally, time of use rates have worked very well for solar. It's actually a big benefit where you're getting higher rates for the middle of the day when you're exporting energy to the grid, getting credits. And then if you're using power in the evening, you're purchasing it from the utility at lower rates. So daytime peaking TOU is lined up great with solar production. It's been a big benefit. But the shift to evening peaking TOU, the importance of that cannot be overstated. It just is. It's a whole different picture when suddenly you're selling power at low rates and buying it at high rates. And so this is just one example of what's proposed for Edison in their main large commercial tariff. And that's a scary thing in itself. And if this is the way it turns out, but then there's also the issue of uncertainty, where we haven't known. It's been up in the air for over a year now what the rates are going to be. So it's very hard for a customer to make a decision based on the uncertainty of the future rate structure. So next slide. Then we have storage. For the self-generation incentive program, there's a lot of hope that we can overcome the evening time use rates by having a battery on every solar system. And to the extent that that's affordable, the system pencils out, we absolutely want that to be the case. I love this report's emphasis on Solar Plus. It's exactly what we should all be thinking of. And we can see that with the recent changes in the SGIP program, we're seeing a lot of increased activity in terms of the first stages of signing a contract with the customer and applying for a rebate reservation from the utilities. This So I think that this will continue. There's enough money in there for some of this growth over the next couple of years, and there will be some incentive-fueled growth in customer-sided energy storage for the next couple of years. There may not be enough to truly get to the point where we've transformed the market as we did with the CSI program and solar. So we're concerned that the level of these rebates will ramp down more quickly than the price of storage ramps down. If we look at the next slide, we have the different incentive levels by incentive step. So like CSI, SGIP has been set up as a step-down level, and the theory is that as more systems get installed, there's both an experience factor and also the mass market potential, the volume that allows you to reduce your prices, and you need less incentive money to give the same value to the customer. The problem is there's really not enough money in the SGIP budget to be a truly market transformational program, and we're very concerned that as these rebates go down, it quickly gets to the point where the storage costs haven't come down in step, and you can no longer make projects pencil. So we're now in the middle of step 2 for most of the utilities and market sectors. Some of the step 2 money has been used up, and we're waiting for step 3 in some segments to open probably the beginning of the year. And but this is what we're trying to keep pace with. We'd love to get some. There's not sufficient money in here to do the job that needs to be done, but it's absolutely something, and it's gonna spur a lot of activity. So next slide. Okay, and then let's talk about with CCAs how we can work together and turn this around, make solar plus storage and plus demand response and other things really mainstream. The first off, on-bill financing was one of the recommendations in the report. I'm a big fan of this idea, and I see the CCAs as being potentially really successful in just leveraging their relationships with customers to make it easy to install solar plus storage, both from the initial steps of actually signing up, finding a contractor, doing the process of installing, and then also paying for it over time with a small fee on the bill. And the idea on bill financing is you're saving more money than you're paying on that fee, and it's a win-win situation. And the CCA just is a credible voice that has this billing capacity, being able to make it easy for customers, both logistically and financially. I think it's a huge advantage that we need to figure out and take advantage of. On storage rebates, again, the SGIP is not enough to be market transformational, and having a small amount of additional money, especially as we get to the lower steps in SGIP, would make a big difference. We've seen recently Sonoma Clean Power, and I understand MCE may follow to offer rebates for EVs. And this is fantastic. They're using some of their reserve money to incentivize something that's a very good clean energy product. And frankly, it's not a lot of money. $2,000 for an expensive car doesn't completely change the economics for the customer, but it's together with marketing, and it's a little bit of money, and it really is spurring a lot of activity. I think the same thing is true with energy storage. It doesn't need to be a lot of money, and then it would be interesting to sit down and talk about, in exchange for a CCA rebate on storage, what kind of operating conditions do you want to have for the storage system to make sure that it has the benefits that you need to manage your requirements. One thing to keep in mind for energy storage is that the cost of local storage is a lot smaller than centralized storage. Whereas when utilities do a big battery next to a large utility scale power plant, ratepayers are paying 100% of that cost. But when you put a battery behind a meter, the customer is paying for most of that cost, and yet using that battery in a way that benefits the grid. So we can leverage the customer investment to get grid benefits, and as we get the price signals right on the rate structure and whatever other goals need to be put in place to ensure grid services, you're leveraging private investment in order to get grid benefits and GHG reduction. So I think that it's really a sector that we should focus on together. Demand response, I mean, there are some incredible inefficiencies in the energy markets, and traditional demand response programs are really do a poor job of managing them. They're clunky. They just get at very big problems, very general problems without the more specific and maybe high dollar problems. And so there should be a daily demand response market that involves energy storage at customer sites, and I think DER providers and CCAs can work together to figure out the rules and setting those up. Neighborhood virtual net metering. This is something that the PUC is considering as part of the NEM tariff, is to create the opportunity to have neighborhood solar systems, especially in low-income neighborhoods. And CCAs can be a partner in helping to match customers up with that opportunity. One of the biggest problems with community solar is the customer acquisition. There's just no margin for it, and it's expensive to go out and convince people to sign up. And if CCAs can work together to match customers, especially low-income customers, with opportunities, that would be a huge benefit. And then, sorry, the slide got a little jumbled here, but partnering with DER providers to identify the high-value locations for installing systems. And again, there are some locations that are that would benefit the grid a lot more than others in installing TERs, because it's more expensive to do grid upgrades. You want to tear up downtown Oakland to change a transformer or install a fatter wire, costs a lot of money, and so you can it's really high value to put in TER in some of those locations. Providers don't have access to that data, and as Chris mentioned, there is a grid mapping tool being developed, but it is not making nearly the amount of progress that people expected it to, and having data available that can really identify those locations. And I think CCAs will have greater visibility into some of that grid data, and can help manage a process where truly they partner with DER providers to capitalize on the best opportunities in high value locations. And then a couple other things that aren't on that slide that I want to mention is, one, there's been the NEM adder of added 1 cent on the value of NEM credits. I don't know that, it's my impression that it's not really driving any business, that no one's really selling around that, but it's certainly a good thing, and it makes up for the fact that CCA prices are a little bit lower, and probably some people do mention it, so that we recognize that that CCAs are doing that. That's a good thing. And also the NEM onboarding for new CCAs is extremely important, so that existing solar customers don't lose credit. So we need to work together on that. And then the other one that should have been on that list is rates. And traditionally CCAs are mirroring IOU rates, and I understand the necessity of that and the value of that. But to the extent that IOUs are not coming through with rates that work for energy storage, or potentially in NEM 3, we don't know what's going to happen, but we need to have a conversation about rate structure and the things that CCAs can do on their own, independent of the IOUs. And then, so the final slide here, not just with the specific local programs, but reforming the beast as a whole is something that we need to work together on. The wholesale markets are extremely difficult for behind-the-meter resources to participate in. In some cases, it's against the rules, and everyone recognizes that it should not be against the rules. We need to not only enable it, but to make it easy for customer-sided resources to be aggregated and participate in wholesale markets. Also, the entire utility business model is built against local energy. Utilities get incentivized for building more infrastructure, and really we should be building less infrastructure and having more local resources and microgrids. And utilities are participating in the conversation because they have to, but really they're incentivized against that, and that's a problem. It's going to be hard to make progress as long as the utilities have a perverse incentive against local resources. And then again, energy storage needs to get to a place where there's higher volume, both from the products, putting out high volume of product to bring down the cost of manufacturing, but then also on the installation side, and in terms of permitting, financing, inspecting, and selling energy storage, the more experience, we need a lot more experience before we can really bring those costs down. And it's something we can work on together. So I think that there's a lot of alignment here between CCAs and DER providers to work together on creating a different vision for the grid of the future that is that involves local resources first and centralized resources second. So that's what I have, and I'd love to hear any questions that you have.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Brad. Again, like Chris, fantastic presentation. And I actually have a few questions, but I do want to allow our audience to go first. So, folks, hopefully you have been posting some questions. I am going to try to see those now. Let's see. So what I see here, I'm going to try to go back to full screen. Whenever I click on the control panel, it unfortunately drops us from the full screen. So here's our presenters again so that we can look at their smiling faces as opposed to that Q&A thing. So a question comes in from Christine. Will the proposed change to grid regionalization impact outcomes? I presume that means outcomes for solar deployment, rate of solar deployment. It's not clear whether that's to Chris or Brad, but either one of you want to take on the question, will the proposed change to grid regionalization impact outcomes?
Well, it's going to have a big impact on how the wholesale market works, and there's a proposal to basically change from a California run grid to a Western regionally run grid, and the main reason for that is with the RPS standard that requires a percentage of the utility's power to come from renewable sources to give them more access to wind in Wyoming, and also at the few days a year when we have more solar power than we can use locally, we can sell it at a better price to neighboring states and just manage the balance of utility scale renewables. Our general feeling on that is we should be looking locally more than nationally. That first off, we should do microgrids, not half the nation grid. And so we're skeptical of that emphasis. With that said, however, in the wholesale markets, there are some reasons to bring down the cost of RPS resources by managing them more regionally.
Thank you for that. Chris, did you have anything to add?
It's just my understanding that in this whole discussion of a regional approach, it's going to be important to understand what role the CCAs will be allowed to play in that process. So that's something to watch for as this discussion unfolds.
Right, and we are expecting, the bills that dealt with grid regionalization are carrying over to 2018, so that will reemerge in the legislature as an issue starting January 3rd. Okay, we did have a question, basic question, just about what do we mean by Solar Plus. So I'll take that one, and you guys can add if you want. But Solar Plus, essentially, it's looking at solar no longer really as a siloed technology where you would just consider the solar by itself and put it up on your roof or wherever in a commercial application or whatnot, but that it is deployed in an integrated fashion with storage, electric vehicle charging, fuel switched home appliances, and the like, so that you are deploying it in such a way that you can start to really manage if it's a smart deployment of EV chargers, for example. There's opportunities for the load for the grid manager to help with the load shape and deal with the duck curve, which is a whole nother thing that I'm not going to unpack here, but that's essentially Solar Plus. Is Solar Plus these other related technologies? Chris or Brad, did you want to add anything to that?
I would just add that you think of the solar system as the engine, and then the storage, the EV charging, the efficiency, the smart controllers allow you to get a lot more value and flexibility out of your solar generation system. So it gives the property owner and the system owner a lot more tools to manage their energy. And in this context of the shift in the residential rates to time of use, a solar system with a battery attached and a means to capture the daytime solar energy and then use it on site to supply your nighttime load means real savings in terms of your electric rate and your bill. So Solar Plus is a way in which the solar technology can be made more capable, more flexible, and deliver more value to the owner.
Thank you for that. All right, here's another one. The question is from Paul, and it is, does integrated IDER, integrated distributed energy resources, mean that DER will not be limited to a net metering role? Will IDER be able to sell energy to the CCA or utility currently limited with return only available annually? Is this the birth of what is called elsewhere retail energy? I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but maybe one of you do, Chris or Brad?
Well, another way, that's the buzzword you hear now is a transactional grid, where you're able to provide services to your neighbors, to utilities, to anyone of various sorts. And I think that it is the vision to head in that direction. IDER as a term in itself means different things to different people. Within the PUC world, it's really just about the sourcing mechanisms for distributed resources. We've identified that we want more local solar storage efficiency, smart homes. How do we go about getting them through programs, tariffs, and solicitations? But really, that's my limited PUC world vision, and I think the vision presented in the report is much broader and more important, is to have the transactional grid.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say that for me, the IDER, the Integrated Distributed Energy Resources, at the core of that idea is that the property owner, the building owner, has tools from technology now to very distinctly manage their energy needs, their energy generation, their interaction with the grid. And there are a number of opportunities for that ability to be responsive to the grid at a particular site, because you have this package of technologies. There is real value out there, but they're kind of still building the airplane as we fly in terms of connecting the dots to make sure that an on-site Solar Plus system can actually recoup the full value of what it is providing to the grid. So that's evolving in real time right now, and we don't know how exactly it's going to turn out. But I think in the age of the Internet of Things and the big data and data analytics, that we have the tools to turn this into a very responsive system that can bring that value that individuals are creating through their investment in a Solar Plus system. That value can be captured on their behalf.
Okay, thank you, Chris. All right, here's another one, this one from Daniel. Are you aware of Assembly Bill 634? Do you know of many programs, many or any, I'm not sure, programs that focus on helping multifamily residences have solar installations? Do you have any suggestions on how to increase solar installations for these units? So it's a question about multifamily solar at multifamily residences.
Yes, I believe AB 634 is a way to make community solar more friendly to apartment dwellers, and did not make it through the legislature this year. One bill that will make a big impact here is one that CalCEA sponsored a couple of years ago, AB 693, and it is incentive money for low-income apartment buildings for solar, and specifically and potentially also for storage. And for tenants, you have the split incentive where it doesn't make sense for the tenant to invest in solar, but it's the tenant that needs the savings on the bill to pay for it, and so it's a huge problem that half of the market of the state is off limits from customer-sided energy solutions, and so there has been a low-income multifamily housing program for years, but it has mostly been used by property managers to deal with the common area load, the lights and the elevators and the rest, and hasn't really been used to offset tenant load. So AB 693 was passed to say we're going to create a separate incentive money just for the portion of solar that offsets tenant load, and it has to offset a certain amount. And that will kick in very soon. We're expecting the proposed decision on the final rules to come out from the PUC next month. So the money would be up and running slightly right after the first of the year.
Okay, thanks, Brad. We have a few more questions. There's several questions that have come in just about sort of availability of the PowerPoint slides and other sort of availability of information. We will have all the information related to this webinar available to everyone who has been in attendance. And so, yes, I will follow up with those questioners about that kind of thing afterward. A couple more questions here. One is, Chris, you mentioned the mapping tool coming up from the state. What is the mapping tool called that will be able to show optimal location for distributed energy resources? Is there a name for that?
It's actually in two pieces. I'm looking here to see if I can find that. The locational net benefit analysis is a term that is associated with this pilot program. So there's two components to it. They've conducted, I believe, 3 demonstration projects at the 3 IOUs, and they're in the process of figuring out, okay, now that we've tested this, what is the framework, and I believe there's a working group that's putting together a framework for the actual technical mapping process that could be built out and made available around the state. Brad, do you have a comment or information?
Well, that's exactly right. We expect the hosting capacity side of that to be ready next summer to show the areas of the grid where there's current ability to interconnect more resources. And then the locational benefits one is one that is a little bit more is run into snags, and there's not a lot of agreement on what it should, on the methodology. But so we'll continue to work on that.
Okay, thanks you guys. So we do have more questions coming in, but we don't have more time, so I'm going to move us along here. Just a reminder that we do have that forum available for folks who want to continue the conversation, and that URL link to get in there is on the PowerPoint slide that's in the handouts. Just dates and reminders of things that are coming up in the near future. This on October 31st, this is real scary, there is going to be a customer choice workshop in Sacramento hosted by the California Public Utilities Commission. Community choice is going to be a featured topic, as will be all other aspects of customer choice. It's an all-day workshop in Sacramento. The next monthly Local Energy Alliance Network market call is on November 10th. We Center for Climate Protection folks will be participating in the InfoCast CCA Summit in Santa Clara. It's a 3-day event. The Clean Power Healthy Communities Conference is on Friday, November 17th in Oakland. And our next webinar, once again, is going to be on November 29th. We'll have Nicole Capretz of the Climate Action Campaign down in San Diego, and another presenter to talk about the situation there with the SEMPRA Marketing Against the Community Choice Energy Emerging program there. So with that, we will conclude today's webinar. Thanks again to our presenters, Chris Cohn and Brad Heavner, Really appreciate you guys, and thank you everybody that joined us today. Any follow-up questions, please reach out to me. That's my contact information there. And folks, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us. Signing off.